Bonjour. I've just exhausted my knowledge of the French language. Okay. Good morning and welcome to the Minneapolis Institute of Art. I'm Boyd Ratchey, the president of the Friends of the Institute. Only at the Institute would it be a diversity to hire an aging white male. So the friends are your hosts for the today's lecture and for the luncheon that follows. Today's lecture begins the Friends Fall Lecture series. It's made possible by the generous support of the Mark and Mary Fiterman Fund. Today, I want to introduce Chris Erickson. Chris, would you stand? She is the two key things about her. She's a good member of the Friend. She's the chief administrator of the Fiterman Fund, and it was her idea to have this topic for our opening lecture. So, friend, thank you, Chris. We are quite pleased to welcome today's guest speaker, Michel Picaud. He's president of another group of friends, the Friends of the Notre Dame de Paris, the American fund supporting the rework and renovation of the cathedral. What is important is that he's been doing that since 2016, 3 years before April 15th, the day of the fire. They were then working, if I remember correctly, on renovating and reconstructing the spire and one of the flying buttresses. He'll speak to that later. I do want to welcome his wife, Cece. Cece, would you stand? It's first time for her in America, and I was asking her last night, and she said, it's not the last time. So, first I have a couple of short announcements about the Friends in our programs. We always start out like it's the 6th grade. I have some announcements. And I want to talk to you about what we, the Friends, are doing. The Institute has this beautiful painting by Maximilian Lewis, and Rachel McGarry tells me it's on the way back up in the galleries. It's really a wonderful painting with the activity of Paris itself and a beautiful view of the cathedral and the spire. We have a number of events in this month and in October. September 15th and 20th, the Friends Only Book Club will be meeting. We have a members event, which I think may be sold out, but you may want to check at the Friends office. Good to hear. You see how close I am to what's. But this is you can observe a bronze pour. And it is a worthy thing to do. So you can sign up with us at the Friends office here. We also have an art and architecture trip to Des Moines. It's a tour, and there are openings on that. You can also sign up there. And I really encourage you on that. This is a delight. I've always enjoyed Des Moines, and it is a marvel of good art, good architecture, and fine food and wonderful walkabouts. The downtown is, to me, more interesting than Minneapolis. Lots of grade changes, lots of places to walk, very enjoyable. Then our next lecture is on October 5th, early in the month, with our own Leslie Urania, who is a new curator in global contemporary art. She sees photography and contemporary art as a mode for social change. So it should be an interesting lecture. Now I'm going to move on. The tour is great fun in Des Moines. I have 2 points to close with, and you always hear this. Silence your cell phone, please. When Michel finishes, he will ask for questions and answers. We will have the mics. Don't ask a question until you have a mic in hand, and then speak and give the question. That way the whole the entire audience will be able to enjoy it. Now, I'd like to introduce Rachel McGarry, the Elizabeth Macmillan Chair of European Art and Curator of European Paintings and Works on Paper. She's one of our own Maya curators. Rachel.
Thank you, Boyd, and thank you, Friends of the Institute, Friends of Mia. So it is an honor to have Michel Picaud, president of the Friends of Notre Dame de Paris, at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. We all remember with horror watching Notre Dame burn in 2016. I was furiously contacting my colleagues on the 16th, which is my son's 15th birthday. I was calling people in France to see what had been the fate of what's the fate of the art objects inside Notre Dame. The monumental altarpiece, The Triumph of Jove by Guido Reni, whom I wrote my dissertation on, was in the cathedral, and it's 13.5 feet high. So I couldn't fathom how the firefighters of France could possibly get this huge altarpiece and all the other objects in danger outside of the cathedral. But they managed to save that painting and many, many other things. And it's nothing short of a miracle. But so much was lost: the roof, the cathedral spire, and we'll hear more about that this morning. So hearing about the rebirth of the international treasure today from Michel Picaud will be certainly fascinating. He is president, as I said, of the Friends of Notre Dame of Paris, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to raising funds to accelerate the restoration of the iconic Paris Cathedral, a position that he's held since October 2016. Prior to that, Michel he brings a lot of really interesting experience to this position because he served as COO of International Markets for the Demos Group, one of the main European learning and development companies, and as president and CEO of HR Access Solutions, a leading human resource software provider, part of Fidelity Investments. He was also SVP of Orange Business Services Equant and CEO of Alcatel Réseaux d'entreprise, I should say. He worked for Bosch Telecom Group in France and in Germany. And he is graduate of the Ecole Polytechnique in Paris and the Mines ParisTech and the Telecom ParisTech. So I have to mention also that he's married, as we've met Cécile, and is the proud father of 4 sons and 2 daughters and grandfather of 1 granddaughter. So please help me give a warm welcome to
Well, thank you very much, Boyd and Rachel, and thank you very much to Mia and to the friends of Mia for the invitation to talk about Notre Dame de Paris. So I am not an historian, I am not an architect. So I will try to give you and to walk you through, I would say, some ideas about the story of Notre Dame de Paris. And I will also walk you through what happened at this terrible fire in 2019, and even more importantly, I will give you information about the restoration project of Notre Dame, which is going on right now since 4 years now, and still for another years, probably until the end of this decade. I am an engineer, but I have a technical problem, which is that I don't succeed getting from one. Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, about the story of the cathedral, so you need to know that Notre Dame de Paris, the first stone of Notre Dame de Paris was laid in 1163, so a long time ago, and the architect, or not the architect, but the initiator of this new cathedral was the Bishop of Paris, Maurice de Sully, and it was done in the presence of Pope Alexander III. And it lasted about 100 years to build the cathedral. One point that I wanted also to mention is to give you this reproduction from the 14th century. And you see that the cathedral in the Middle Ages was already in the middle of many churches in Paris. And one of the historians of that time wrote a very nice sentence about it. And he said, in Paris, privileged sanctuary of the Christian religion, beautiful edifices consecrated to God are founded in such great number that there are not many cities among the most powerful in Christianity that can boast on counting so many houses of God. Among those palaces, the imposing church of the most glorious Virgin Mary justly shines as the sun amid other stars. So that's what Jean de Gendon said at that time. And so you see on this other painting how the hand of God at that time was supposed to protect the city of Paris and protect it from the demons which are flying all over. In a little bit later, you see this drawing of the city of Paris. You see in the middle the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which is really in the heart of the city on Ile de la Cité, and which is, I would say, surrounded on the right-hand side on this drawing by the palace of the bishop, and on the left-hand side by the cloister of the canons of the Diocese of Paris. So this is something that you can have a look at in Musée de Cluny in Paris. These are the heads of kings. These head of kings, they were the head of kings of Judah, and they were on the middle gallery of the facade of Notre Dame. And actually what happened, you know that in France we love revolutions. And so during the revolution in 1793, the revolutionary people, they believed that actually they were head of kings of France. And so they said they put all this down, and so the kings, the head of kings disappeared, and they were found back actually relatively recently in 1977, because a guy had come by at that time and had taken all the heads, and they were in a I would say behind a house in France. But these heads of kings, so I recommend, if you visit Paris, so have a look at this head of kings at the Musée of the Middle Ages, Musée de Cluny. They are head of kings from the pre-Gothic sculpture, and they are really wonderful. And I can tell you, they are head of kings of Judah, not of kings of France. So this is where we stood with Notre Dame, effectively, in the morning of April 15, 2019. And even if the cathedral looked wonderful, actually, it was in a very bad state. And so we had started raising funds to restore the cathedral effectively, as Boyd said, from 2016. And our first target was to restore the spire of the cathedral. And this is why when the fire happened, perhaps you remember that we had this big scaffolding all around the cathedral, all around the spire of the cathedral. What was in a very bad state was especially, I would say, the back part of the cathedral and the flying buttresses. And you know that in the Gothic architecture, so the target of every bishop was to raise the cathedral as high as possible and to open very large windows that you can see here, or rose windows, to have the light getting into the cathedral. And evidently the structure of the building was weakened with all these openings. And so the flying buttresses that you see here all around the building are there to effectively ensure that the building stays, I would say, right on it. And so this was the building and the cathedral, as I said, in the morning of April 15, 2019. And then, about more exactly a few days before the fire, so we had started with the renovation of the statues of the spire, because on the spire, you can perhaps see it on this one. Yeah, perhaps you see a few statues. So we had 16 very wonderful statues from the 19th century, representing the 12 apostles and the 4 evangelists, what we call the tetramorph. This is the symbols of the evangelists. And so these statues, and I'll get back to this picture, had been removed 4 days before the fire. And you see, this was really, in a way, a miracle that we could save these statues. And then on April 15, so we had this fire starting at the basis of the spire of the cathedral. And then we had a very strong east wind, which pushed actually the fire towards the towers of the cathedral. Myself, I was at the cathedral on that day, and I had left around 5 p.m. And then I was called back, called at 6:30, and my colleague told me, so the cathedral is burning. So I rushed back from my home with my wife, who supported me. And we were there, I would say, all the night. And you know that the fire engulfed both the spire, the roof. The spire collapsed, and there were very big damages, I would say. So this was a big end of the day. And then in the night, so you see the spire had disappeared, and you still see this scaffolding, which was the scaffolding of the first renovation of the cathedral. And you see perhaps also the two gables of the transept on each side, so without any roof anymore. And so this was I would say a problem, naturally, because the roof is part of the balance of the overall building. And so this is what we found the day after. And we had actually so no spire anymore, no roof anymore, and 3 big cracks in the vaults of the cathedral. So evidently in the middle here, you see the hole at the location of the spire, which had collapsed. And we had also another crack in the vaults of the nave just before, and also another one in the transept, in the north transept of the cathedral. And all the timbers of the roof, and you know that this was a very wonderful structure, because we had the equivalent of 1,000 oak trees building the structure of the roof, and we call this the forest. All these timbers had been burnt and had disappeared and were lying on the floor, as you can see here. And so this is another another view. So you see where the spire was, and actually this 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 burnt scaffolding, in a way, was for us also a way of safeguarding the building, because actually it relied on the walls of the cathedral, and it helped ensure the stability of the building and additional damages. So when we started after the fire, so after this terrible night because the fire engulfed the spire, the roof, and began to touch the north tower of the cathedral, where there was a big wooden belfry supporting the bells of the cathedral. And so the fire started in the north belfry, and this is when the firefighters very fortunately and very well succeeded stopping the fire and avoid, because if the fire had taken into the belfry, I think the whole towers would have fallen down. So this is a view also after the fire. So you see that we had begun very quickly to build on the left-hand side of this picture. So you see wooden structure to I would say to buttress the walls of the cathedral. And so during more or less 1.5 years to 2 years, we were in what we call the safety phase of the cathedral to avoid additional damages. And then we started working on the vaults of the cathedral, and we had to remove all the I would say the burnt timbers and so on, and we had craftspeople like this one that we called squirrels, because they were hanging on ropes and removing, I would say, one by one all the burnt elements. So these squirrels were very helpful to begin the safeguarding of the cathedral. Afterwards, so we worked on the vaults themselves, and we installed a floor just under the vaults, and also these big brackets, which helped, I would say, sustain the ribs of the vaults of the cathedral. We had also to protect the cathedral from the weather and from the rain, and so we installed a big umbrella all above the cathedral to protect it. And apart from and also, I would say, at the crossing of the transept where the spire was, we installed also such an umbrella. Inside the cathedral, so it was very. So I had the opportunity to effectively follow the work very closely in the past years, and so you had this big scaffolding. So the entirety of the cathedral was filled by such scaffolding, so thousands of tubes, in order to build, I would say, all these elements that I have shown already, to protect and to rebuild the vaults. And so this is a nice example of what's been done with the statues of the spire. So this one was one of the 16 statues. This is a view of the Apostle Saint Thomas. And actually, this statue had been installed by Viollet-le-Duc, a very famous architect who restored the cathedral in the middle of the 19th century. And Viollet-le-Duc had commissioned these statues, and all the statues are looking down to the city of Paris, except this one, because you see Saint Thomas is looking up. And actually, Viollet-le-Duc, who was a very modest person, he gave Saint Thomas his own face, and he, as you can see, he admires the spire. so he admires his own work. And so these statues, you can see them also today. They are all restored, and they are visible in Musée du Trocadéro in Paris, and they will be reinstalled on the spire when the spire will be rebuilt, so within 1.5 years now. Another very nice view is this view of the west rose window of the cathedral. this west rose window. So you see the Virgin Mary in the middle. So this is one of the, I think there are 64 representations of the Virgin Mary in the cathedral. And so this is one of them. And fortunately, the rose windows were not touched despite the heat and also the watering which followed with the firefighters. Actually, the glass, I would say, was protected and was maintained. And so we have the opportunity now, evidently, to restore these rose windows like this one. You will see a nice example. Also, it's a detail of this west rose window. This is the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph with Potiphar's wife. So if you know this part of the Bible, so this is a very nice story, and Joseph and his brothers. So it's a story which is because it was the habit in the Middle Ages that the rose windows or the sculptures, they were actually learning, I would say, the Bible to the people in the cathedral and to the lay people. And so this is one example of this detail of the rose window. Another one here, it's the story of Jesus and the paralytic. So, you know, and the paralytic is saved and gets back with his you say it is on his back. And so this one is also interesting. So this is one of the, what we call the maze of the cathedral. The maze of the cathedral, actually, they were very large paintings of about 4 by 3 meters, which were offered by the Guild of Goldsmiths of Paris to the chapter of the cathedral every year in the 17th century until beginning of the 18th century. And so this is an example. This is when Saint Paul is falling from his horse on his way to Damas. And so we had about 14 of these mazes in the cathedral, and they were fortunately, so we were able to remove them because what happened is that the fire was at the top of the cathedral, and what was in the chapels was saved, and it was very, very, very good for us to save all the artworks of the cathedral. So perhaps you heard at this point, I can tell you also a story. There was also within the cathedral the remains of the crown of thorns of Christ, and they were kept in the chapel of the central chapel of the cathedral, and they were kept in a safe. And actually, my colleague, I would say, with the register of the cathedral, he succeeded saving the crown of thorns. But actually, when it was during the fire, and so when he came to the safe with the firefighters protecting him, actually suddenly he forgot the code. And so he he had to call a colleague outside, because this is when you go to a distributor of money. So if you make once a wrong code, you are lost, because afterwards you will also always do the wrong code. And so he succeeded in the end to get the crown of thorns and to bring it to the Louvre, where it is now, and it will evidently be brought back to the cathedral after the reopening. So this is another example of a statue, which is the Pietà, which was in the choir of the cathedral, with the two kings of France, Louis XIII and Louis XIV on each side, because you know that in France we are very respectful of our kings, and except during revolutions. And so this Pietà was saved actually, and this was also for us. So it will be, by the way, it will be restored, because evidently it has been touched by and it will be restored thanks to a major American corporate by the name of Bank of America, which has accepted to fund the restoration of these statues. Another part, a very important part of the cathedral, was the grand organ at the west side of the cathedral. And you see that this grand organ actually was evidently touched by the water, touched by the lead dust because of the melting of the covering of the cathedral. And so it will be, it's currently restored, and it will be reinstalled before the reopening of the cathedral. And what's interesting also to know is that actually the pipes of the cathedral themselves, they will be maintained and restored. But what was touched was actually the leather joints, which are between the pipes and the rest of the grand organ, and with the water, so these leather joints, they need to be replaced actually. And so this is one of the difficulties we have, and we will. So this is currently underway. And what is also perhaps interesting to know is that we will need about 6 months to reharmonize the grand organ before it can play again. So this is a very, very sensitive parts. So here you have the chief architect of the cathedral, so Philippe Villeneuve, showing, I would say, the restoration of one of the pillars and of the joints of the pillar of the cathedral. So it was done actually with a technique which is what we call the latex technique, which means that actually we spray latex on the different elements, pillars, walls, and so on. And afterwards, after 2 or 3 days, we remove the latex, and we can remove the dirt from the walls or the pillars without touching the overall pillar. So that's what we use as a technique to do so. And so you see, so this is, so if you visited Notre Dame before the fire, you have never seen this. So you see it will be very bright. So this is after cleaning and restoration. And you see that it's very bright, and you will have a wonderful cathedral which will be available after the restoration. And you see another example of how the vaults have been cleaned up with one of the rose windows. It's the north rose window. And another example. And also to give you some elements on the rose window. So you need to know that in the Middle Ages, actually, the glaziers, when they were working, they were taking care of the orientation, the direction of the rose windows. And they didn't use the same colors if the rose window was on the north side, so with a little light, or on the south side. And for instance, this one is on the north side with many blue colors, whereby on the south side, so you had more yellows and reds than blues. So because they were adapting their art, I would say, to the light. So this is one of the keystones of the vaults. So this is before restoration. And you see how it will appear now after restoration. So once more, you will have a cathedral which will be, I would say, unique and much better than what we had before after this restoration. When we worked also on the rebuilding of the spire, so at the crossing of the transept, we discovered some sarcophaguses, as the one you have here, of canons of the cathedral. This one is from the 17th century. But we also we rediscovered also parts of the cathedral which had existed before, and especially there was a big rood screen, I would say, closing the choir of the cathedral, and this rood screen. So we found pieces of this rood screen here in the ground at this location. And so this will be all these pieces of sculpture which are very unique. They will be also presented at the Musée de Cluny, Museum of the Middle Ages after restoration. Another example of what we do, this is the restoration of one of the side chapels of the choir. And you see that evidently this is completely different from what we had before, where all was very black. And so you see the colors here that have been I would say, completely renewed. So this is another example of restoration of one chapel. Here's the story of Saint Madeleine washing the feet of Christ. And you see still some scaffolding around. And this is a drawing of the spire of the cathedral as it was rebuilt by Viollet-le-Duc in the middle of the 19th century. And actually, it was the first spire from the Middle Ages actually was removed at the end of the 18th century because it was crumbling down. And then between the end of the 18th century and the middle of the 19th century, there was no spire. And I had the pleasure yesterday to be welcomed by the curator of the drawings, I think. And he showed me a drawing of Notre Dame in the 1850s without spire, because this was the time where we had no spire. And you see the apostles and the evangelists on each side of the spire. So we will rebuild exactly the same spire externally than the one you used to see and to admire before the fire. And why do we do that? Because we have all the, I would say, all the documentation about the restoration of Viollet-le-Duc in the 19th century, whereby we have nothing from the Middle Ages. Because the Middle Ages, they had no computer, nothing, but they built wonderful cathedrals. Alors, we will evidently also ensure that the safety of the cathedral be good, and so we will install sprinkling systems, and we will part the roof of the cathedral to avoid evidently any new fire or problem like the one we had. So here, this is a picture from last July, actually, and you see this is the building of the bases of the spire. So this is the wooden structure in the middle here that will go up in the sky of Paris. And today, the scaffolding, which will go up to 96 meters or 100 meters of the spire, is already built. And so progressively, we bring the big timbers to build the spire. And so this will be done in the course of 2024, now and until 2024. Another interesting thing is the structure of the roof with these trusses that will sustain the roof. And so they are built here. This is in a workshop outside Paris. And it's progressively reinstalled inside the cathedral to build the roof of the cathedral. What you need to know also is that today we are in the middle of the restoration of the cathedral, and we have about 500 craftspeople working in the cathedral, and we have about the equivalent of 500 people working outside the cathedral in different workshops, especially this one for the trusses, and afterwards they are installed in the cathedral. We are also cutting stones, so this is inside the cathedral under the roof. And so we cut some of the stones on site using the same type of limestone that was used in the Middle Ages. So that's on site. And we have also, just outside the cathedral, we have another workshop for cutting stones. And you see that they use actually the examples of fallen parts of the structure of the cathedral to redo, I would say, the same type of sculpture that you see here. And this is one of the gargoyles of the cathedral. And so when the gargoyle is in a good state, so we will reinstall the gargoyle on site. And when not, so we will actually, so this is another example, this is the alchemist that you see on the right-hand side. So this is one of the gargoyles installed by Viollet-le-Duc in the 19th century, especially on the towers. And when the gargoyle is not in a sufficient state, so we make a copy of the gargoyle on the left-hand side that you see here. And afterwards, we will re-sculpt, I would say, the gargoyle and reinstall the gargoyle in the cathedral. So this is the cathedral as of today. So what you need to know is that we have different steps in the restoration project. As I said, so we began and in the first 2 years after 2019 with the safety phase to protect everything. Then we are now, and until the end of 2024, in what we call the rebuilding phase. So the idea is to rebuild what was destroyed, and especially the roof, the spire, and to clean up and restore the interior of the cathedral. And our target is to reopen the cathedral in December 2024 at the end of this phase. And our, I would say, internal target is to reopen on the 8th of December because it's the feast of the Immaculate Conception. So it would be a great event for Notre Dame and for celebrating the Virgin Mary. And afterwards, but this will continue afterwards with a second restoration phase, which will be especially touching the external part of the cathedral with the flying buttresses, which are now, I would say, protected by big brackets, but this will need to be done afterwards. And so we will have a second phase of restoration after this reopening, end of 2024, which will last probably until 2029, most probably the end of the decade. So this is what you should see end of next year. So a nice view of Notre Dame. A few words about the budget, because I know that when I speak to American audience, if I do not mention the dollars, I will be thrown out of the room very quickly. So the estimate for the overall restoration budget is above 1 billion euros, 1,050 million as of today. We had pledges from 4 very large tycoons or corporates, French corporates. So Arnaud, this is the LVMH group. Betancourt, this is the L'Oréal group. Pinot, this is the Kering group, and Total, this is the oil company, for about 600 million. We have about 250 million already pledged up to now, which means that we still need to complete the restoration at a level of 200 million over the next 6 or 7 years. As I said, the reopening targeted in 2024. I want to mention also a sad news, and I would like to honor the memory of General Georgelin, who was heading the public agency in charge of the restoration. So Friends of Notre Dame de Paris is helping fund this agency. Unfortunately, General Georgelin died accidentally last month. And so this is very sad because he was managing this restoration with, I would say, the hand of a general, but very strongly. Fortunately, so he will be replaced by his deputy, Philippe Jost. And so we are very confident that we will stick to this timeline. So in terms of conclusion, I would say that my job is to raise funds. So I am very happy because we have now we have about 40,000 American donors. So we were, for the little story, but I told Boyd yesterday, so we had 800 donors the morning of the fire. So in 2 years, we had succeeded getting 800 donors. And 1 day later or 2 days later, we had 10,000 donors. And my system was completely crushed because I used to send an email to everybody donating to Notre Dame, but I could not follow because at the time I had 400 emails an hour, so completely. And today we have this 40,000 members of Friends of Notre Dame de Paris. So if you want to join us, you will find brochures somewhere, probably around the buffet, and we will be very happy to welcome you and to get your support. If you can help us, I would say, gathering the millions that we still need. And lastly, I would like to say that actually in my jobs, I try to get, I would say, major partners in the big American cities. So I have now board members of Notre Dame de Paris in the US, in 6 or 7 very large cities. So I have known in Minneapolis, so I would be very happy if I find a volunteer to help us to support Notre Dame in Minneapolis and in the region. So thank you very much. But I'm at your disposal. I am unfortunately sitting on this seat because I had a bad accident myself, so a little bit earlier than General Georges, but I succeeded making it to Minneapolis. So I will be very happy to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michel, for your wonderful presentation. I'm stationed at a church, the Cathedral of St. Paul, across the river. And when this happened a number of years ago, one of the first things that we asked ourselves is, what if something horrific happened to our cathedral? How would we prevent fire? How would we have a large dome? How would we get water up there? I'm curious, two things. Number one, in the restoration, did they install any kind of a sprinkler system for moving forward? And if so, how on earth can you get water up to the tower? And secondly, on the night of the fire, I'd be curious to know, when you were there watching, what your emotions were, and did you think that the entire cathedral was going to collapse? Mm-hmm. And that's a tough question, but I'd be very curious to know.
So to the first question, yes, we will install. Actually, we had contacts with St. Patrick's in New York, and I must say that Cardinal Dolan, for instance, is a very strong supporter of Notre Dame. He even created St. Patrick's for Notre Dame organization to help us. And effectively, we will have sprinkling systems under the roof, and we will have also portion the roof in order also to not to have a possible expansion of fire under the roof. So sprinkling system and portioning of the roof. And so for the night of the fire, so I was with my wife. So I would say we were anxious about it, but I would say what happened, but I said, okay, so we will rebuild Notre Dame. So I was very optimistic in a way, even if the events spent all the night, or a big part of the night. And what was very, for me, wonderful in a way, is that the people around, they were praying, crying. So and the weeks, actually in the 1 or 2 weeks after the fire, so I spent the 2 weeks on the bridges all around, and you had actually TV channels from all over the world, I would say, watching it. So it was very impressive and touching.
Thank you very much. I'm asking a question that my son asked me when we first discussed this. My son's a architect and a structural engineer. If it's reconstructed to be the same way it was before the fire, won't the cathedral be at hazard for another fire?
So I think this is the first response, is the response with the, I would say, all the new systems that we will install. So the cathedral will be redone externally as it was. So you will have exactly the same appearance, but the safety systems inside, they will be modern ones. So we are, for instance, apart from the sprinkling systems, we are completely redoing all the electrical circuits, all the what's related to water and so on. So it will be completely rebuilt and renovated. And this was one of the weak points of Notre Dame, was that there was no enough maintenance for Notre Dame. So you see, the cathedral belongs to the state, but you need to know that in France you have 94 cathedrals like Notre Dame in all the big cities, in all the cities of France. And so after the law of separation of church and state in 1905, it was decided that all the cathedrals would belong to the state. So the state has to fund the maintenance of the cathedral, but it cannot do it. There is not enough budget to do so. And so now with Notre Dame, in a way, it helps also the other cathedrals in France, because the French government dedicates the maintenance budget and the renovation budget to the 93 other cathedrals in France. So in a way, the generosity for the restoration of Notre Dame de Paris, I would say, serves not only Notre Dame, but also, in a way, indirectly, the restoration of the other very beautiful cathedrals that you can find in France. One here, and one at the back. Yeah.
So can you tell the story a little bit about the forest that's going back up? The story about the wood that you're using.
Yeah.
Okay.
So actually the forest, so this structure of 1,000 oak trees, which was the structure of the roof of the cathedral, was partly from the Middle Ages. So the roof of the nave and the roof of the choir was from the Middle Ages, so basically the 12th and 13th century. And the roof and the structure of the roof of the transept and of the spire had been redone by Viollet-le-Duc. So this part was from the 19th century. And so this structure, fortunately, it was studied by one of the three architects of the historical monuments who are in charge of restoring the cathedral. And he had done a complete mapping of all the beams of this structure. And so this will be redone exactly as it was before the fire. So that's in a way, this is fortunate that we have this. Unfortunately, so you will not visit or look at this forest as it was before, but it will be the same, exactly the same. So yes, please.
Okay, so my question is on the practical side. You have all these artisans from around the world now working. How are they living there? Who is there support for them? How do they live while they do this?
So I cannot respond in detail, but what I can tell you is that you know that there is, I would say, the state is the what we call maître d'œuvre, or the overall manager of the restoration, and you have the architects of historical monument, who are the project managers, if you will, and afterwards the architects they contract with companies, generally small companies which are specialized in one type of work or the other. And these companies, they hire effectively craftspeople from different countries. And I know that there is a carpenter from Minnesota who is working, since the article previously today. And so generally these craftspeople, they are within these companies, they are put within these companies, and they are working as I would say employees of these companies for the restoration. So this is part of how we work. We have, apart from the Minnesotan carpenter, we work, for instance, with a German specialist for some of the stained glass windows. For the restoration of the stained glass windows, we have a company in Köln, because you know that there is a very nice cathedral also in Köln. So there are some specialists of stained glass windows. We work also with a British company for the covering of the roof, because they are also specialized in this type of plaques for the covering of the roof. So effectively, we have support from all over the world for this restoration. I'm very thankful for that.
Hello, what caused the fire?
So actually, there is no, the investigation by the police was not conclusive, so it lasted relatively long, but the investigation was not conclusive. What may have happened is that there were some very old clocks under the roof of the transept of the cathedral, and maybe there's been some shortcuts in these old electrical circuits which have triggered the fire. But you know that there was, I would say, an accumulation of circumstances very bad the day of the fire, because we had only one guy in charge of the safety of the cathedral, and so he saw that there was an alert on his panel, but he was misguided. He saw that there was a problem under the roof of the sacristy, which is a separate buildings south of the cathedral. So he went there and there was nothing, but actually the alert was under the roof of the cathedral. So we lost probably 30 or 40 minutes before the firefighters were called, and then there was no permanent firefighting team at the cathedral. Conversely to, for instance, in Versailles, in the Castle of Versailles, we have a permanent firefighting team, but in the cathedral, nobody. And so the firefighters, they were in trucks and they were blocked in the traffic jam in Paris. So they arrived later. And afterwards, there was not enough water. So they said, okay, so we are going to call the boats which will bring the water of the Seine River. And so it took another probably hour and a half to bring them. And so there was, and this accumulation of circumstances, I think this is due to the lack of maintenance and of funds to maintain the cathedral. And this is really the basic problem we had, and that we need absolutely to take care of when we will reopen. Another question in the back. So Boyd is telling me that this is enough. So perhaps one or two questions and we can. Yes, please. Yeah.
There are so many gorgeous pieces of art, sculpture. For instance, the 12 Apostles by the spire, the gargoyles that people have never been able to see. And it puzzles me that you're going to put them right back in a position where people will never be able to see them again. So is there any plan to duplicate them, to put them in a museum, or really why do they have to be up there?
So for the statues of the spire, so they will be back on the spire. So I would recommend that you visit the Musée du Trocadéro before probably mid-2024. And the gargoyles, actually the gargoyles, they are on the towers of the cathedral, and there is a tour of the tower, so you can see the gargoyles from a relatively close view. And so that's what, in my view, what is probably the most annoying is what's related to the rose windows, because the rose windows, they are really wonderful and in their details. And effectively, when you are down in the cathedral, it's difficult to enjoy the full, I would say, colorful rose windows as they are. But okay, so we'll see how we can. We would have a possibility, which would be to open the tribunes of the cathedral, which are up the middle level inside the cathedral. But we need also to take care of, I would say, the safety measures and circuits of visit and so on. And we have the services, the religious services that we have inside the cathedral. So we will work on that to manage everything if possible. But there will be also, and back to my King's heads. So you will have the remainder that have been found in the ground. So they will be presented in this Museum of the Middle Ages in Paris, along with the king's heads. And so I think this is quite possible. It would be possible to watch them from very, very closely. Yeah.
Friends of the Institute, we thank you. Thank you.